Lucille Ball. Just the mention of her name can make millions of people smile even today. She was the woman who redefined comedy, the fearless red-headed queen who turned television into a playground of laughter, wit, and love. She was the star who gave us I Love Lucy, a show that changed entertainment forever and made her one of the most recognizable faces in the world. To the public, she was the hilarious, lovable, bold woman who could make people laugh like no one else could. But behind the dazzling spotlight, behind the awards, behind the thunderous applause, there existed another Lucille, a woman made of pain, heartbreak, hidden love stories, sacrifices, and rumors that followed her from the earliest days of her career to the end of her life. A woman whose private world was far more dramatic than any episode she ever performed on screen. Her laughter was her armor, her courage was her disguise, and her heart carried scars that few people ever knew about. Let's go back to where it all began long before she became a Hollywood legend, when she was simply a little girl from Jamestown, New York, trying to survive a world that seemed determined to break her. Lucille Ball was born on August 6, 1911, and her early life was anything but glamorous. She spent her childhood surrounded not by fame, but by struggle. She knew loss before she ever knew success, pain before she ever knew applause. At just 3 years old, she experienced one of the most devastating moments of her life. Her father, Henry Ball, suddenly passed away from typhoid fever. Lucille adored her father. He was the first person to make her laugh, the man she followed around endlessly, clinging to his legs, begging for attention, smiling up at him with admiration. When he died, her world collapsed. His death left a silence so heavy that it stayed with her forever. That silence shaped her. It taught her that laughter was precious and rare. It taught her that life could take everything in an instant. From that moment forward, Lucille tried to make everyone around her laugh. Not because she was naturally cheerful, but because she never wanted anyone to feel the crushing sadness she had felt as a child. Her comedy was born from heartbreak. Not long after her father's death, her family fell into poverty. They moved constantly, staying in small, cramped rooms, often unsure of how they would pay bills or buy food. Lucille grew up fast. She learned how to fight. She learned how to survive. And she learned that dreams were something you built with your bare hands, no matter how impossible they seemed. When she was a teenager, she dreamed of becoming a performer, of seeing her name in lights, of hearing applause, of proving to the world that she was worth something. But nobody took her seriously. Many people told her she wasn't talented enough. She wasn't beautiful enough. She wasn't strong enough. Some said she would never make it in show business. She was rejected by a New York drama school that famously told her she didn't have what it took to succeed. Most people would have given up. Lucille didn't. She packed her hopes into a suitcase and moved to New York City. She worked odd jobs, struggled for money, auditioned endlessly, and took every small modeling and acting job she could grab. She faced doors slammed in her face more times than she could count. But every time someone said no, she answered silently, "Just wait. You'll see." She believed that her future was bigger than her failures. And she was right. Lucille eventually found her way into Hollywood, slowly climbing from tiny uncredited film roles to larger ones. She worked harder than anyone, determined to earn every inch of success. But the Hollywood she entered was not just glamorous, it was ruthless, filled with pressure, secrets, and rumors that could destroy careers overnight. Studio executives controlled actors like puppets, shaping their image and their relationships. Scandals were covered up, stories were created, and reputations could be rewritten with the snap of a finger. Lucille was strong, but she was also vulnerable. She wanted love just as much as she wanted success, and her heart led her into some complicated and painful romances, stories that few people know the full truth about. Before the world knew Desi Arnaz, the great love of her life, Lucille had already experienced her share of quiet heartbreak. One of her earliest romances was with a young man she was deeply in love with, but her family disapproved. They believed he lacked ambition and could never support her dreams. Not long after, tragedy struck. he died suddenly, leaving Lucille with yet another hole in her heart. It was a loss she rarely talked about publicly, but it remained with her forever. Some say it was one of the reasons she became fiercely independent and emotionally guarded, a woman who always feared losing the people she loved. Hollywood also whispered about Lucille's rumored relationships with several well-known actors and influential figures, rumors that followed her for years. Some said she was romantically involved with the famous filmmaker Alexander Hall, who helped her find roles when she was struggling. Others said she had a secret relationship with comedian Eddie Cantor, who supported her career when she was starting out. There were rumors that she dated powerful studio executives who promised her roles in exchange for love. None of these stories were ever fully confirmed, and Lucille refused to be defined by them, insisting that her success came from hard work, not from men. But behind the rumors was a simple truth. Lucille Ball was searching desperately for real love. She wanted someone who saw more than her beauty or her talent, someone who understood her soul, someone who could protect her heart, someone who wouldn't leave her, like her father did, like her early love did, like her childhood had done. She wanted a partner she could trust, someone who would never give up on her. And then, in 1940, she met the person who would change her life forever. It happened on the set of the film Too Many Girls. Lucille Ball was already an established actress, confident, glamorous, sharp-tongued, and brilliant. Desi Arnaz, however, was a young Cuban musician and actor, fiery, passionate, charming, and bursting with energy. He was 6 years younger than her, and their personalities clashed instantly like fire hitting gasoline. The first moment they saw each other, something electric happened. They were total opposites, yet somehow perfectly aligned. People on set could feel the spark between them immediately. Lucille, who had been lonely for so long, saw someone who made her laugh, not the forced laughter she had mastered as survival, but real laughter. Desi saw a woman with a heart far bigger than the world realized, a woman who was tough because life had forced her to be, but soft underneath. They fell in love fast. A whirlwind romance, a flame impossible to contain. But Hollywood whispered again. People said it would never last. They said Lucille was too serious and Desi was too wild. They said he would break her heart. They said they were too different, that their relationship was doomed. But Lucille didn't listen. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt truly loved. So, just months after meeting, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz married secretly. No cameras, no studio approval, no spotlight. Just two people wildly in love, believing that together they could conquer anything. They thought they had defeated the odds. They were wrong, because behind the scenes, their love story would become one of the most passionate and painful relationships in Hollywood history. Their marriage would be filled with laughter, tears, betrayal, rumors, and scandals that the world still talks about today. And the real truth of what happened behind closed doors is darker and more heartbreaking than anything that ever appeared on television. Lucille had finally found the love she always wanted, but she was about to discover that love can be both a miracle and a battlefield. And this battlefield was only just beginning. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's marriage began like something out of a dream, passionate, wild, magnetic, and filled with hope. They were madly in love, inseparable, and so intensely connected that people around them believed their romance was unstoppable. Lucille once said that when she was with Desi, she felt more alive than at any other moment in her life. He made her feel like the world had finally given her a second chance at happiness, and she clung to that with everything she had. She had grown up surrounded by instability, loss, and fear of abandonment. So when she found Desi, she believed she had found the one person who would never leave her. But their love story, as breathtaking as it was built on fragile ground. Neither of them had any idea how hard the road ahead would be. The first years of their marriage were chaotic. Because Desi was often on tour with his band while Lucille was filming movies in Hollywood. They spent more time apart than together, and every day apart was like a silent test that strained their relationship. Lucille was lonely, terrified of losing him, constantly waiting for the phone to ring, constantly wondering when he would come home. She wanted a quiet, stable home. Desi wanted excitement, music, crowds, celebrations, and the life of a performer. They loved each other, but they lived in different worlds. Rumors started swirling in Hollywood that Desi was being noticed with other women while on the road. Nightclubs, late-night parties. Women who adored him as charm attracted attention everywhere he went. Lucille heard the whispers. She felt the sting of humiliation, but she refused to believe it. She couldn't. She loved him too much. And believing the rumors would mean admitting that her greatest fear, being abandoned, was real. She tried to ignore the gossip. She tried to trust. She tried to smile, but inside, she was breaking. Every night, she waited by the phone. Sometimes it rang, sometimes it didn't. When it did, their conversations were short, rushed, full of tension and pain. When it didn't, she lay awake imagining every possibility, every nightmare, every woman laughing at her from afar. Their fights became explosive. Passion turned to anger. Love turned to desperation. Lucille once admitted that they loved each other too intensely, and that intensity made everything sharper: every argument, every silence, every betrayal. But despite all of this, she refused to let their marriage fail, and she came up with a bold plan. If they couldn't stay together in real life, maybe they could stay together on screen. Lucille wanted something more than movies. She wanted to build a life with Desi. She approached the idea of making a television series together, a show about a married couple who somehow make every situation hilarious and heartfelt. She believed that if they worked together every day, they could save their marriage. They could beat the distance. They could protect what they had. Hollywood executives didn't believe in the idea. They doubted the show would succeed for several reasons. Some believed Desi, as a Cuban-American man, didn't fit the image of a typical American husband. They doubted the public would accept a couple whose cultures and accents were so different. They pushed Lucille to cast someone else in the role of her husband. She refused. She fought for Desi with a fire that shocked everyone. She told them she wouldn't do the show without him. She insisted that people would fall in love with them the way they fell in love with each other. Eventually, the studio agreed, and soon, I Love Lucy was born. When the show premiered in 1951, television changed forever. Audiences didn't just like the show, they adored it. They laughed until they cried. They fell in love with Lucy Ricardo, the silly dreamer, and Ricky Ricardo, the musical husband who somehow always found himself in chaos. Because of her schemes, people believed they were watching real love, real laugh, real marriage. And in a way, they were. Lucille and Desi put their real emotions into every scene. The chemistry on screen was genuine because they truly adored each other. They kissed like they meant it. They held hands like they were afraid of letting go. They fought like real couple fights. They cried real tears. Their hearts were in every frame. Behind the laughter was pain that the world never saw. While the world believed their marriage was perfect, behind the scenes it was falling apart. The pressure of running a new show was enormous. Lucille and Desi became producers and business partners, turning their small project into a groundbreaking empire. They built Desilu Studios, which would one day become one of the most important studios in Hollywood. They worked morning to night, barely sleeping, constantly pushing themselves to do better. The irony was crushing. The harder they worked to save their marriage, the more they lost each other. Desi's stress grew unbearable, and he turned to unhealthy coping habits. He partied more, worked late nights, and stayed away from home for longer stretches. The rumors of affairs came back stronger than ever. Newspapers whispered about his behavior. Hollywood insiders spread stories about his nights out. Lucille tried to confront him, but their conversations only led to bigger fights, screaming, crying, doors slamming. Later, she would describe their marriage as two people who loved each other too much and hurt each other too deeply. Lucille's friends said that she cried in dressing rooms, hoping nobody would hear. She kept smiling for the world, but at home she was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. Her heart was breaking, but she continued filming, continued laughing, continued being the strong woman the world needed her to be. She once said, "It was easier to make millions laugh than to make one man stay." The success of I Love Lucy made them more famous than ever, but it also made their private life impossible to hide. People expected perfection. The world watched them constantly. Every magazine cover praised their marriage as a fairy tale, a legendary love story. And every time Lucille saw those headlines, her heart tightened, knowing the truth was slowly tearing her apart. But then something extraordinary happened, something that changed everything. Lucille became pregnant. It was a miracle, because doctors had told her many times that she likely would never be able to have a child. She had suffered miscarriages before, and each one broke her spirit. So when she learned she was expecting, she believed it was a sign from destiny, proof that her marriage and her dreams could still survive. And in a historic moment that shocked the entertainment world, Lucille and Desi convinced the network to let Lucille's pregnancy be written into the show. It was the first time in American television history that a real pregnancy was shown on screen. In 1953, when Lucy Ricardo gave birth on I Love Lucy, the episode drew more viewers than the broadcast of the president's speech happening the same night. The country was captivated. People celebrated with them. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. Lucille and Desi welcomed a beautiful baby girl, Lucille Arnaz, and later a son, Desi Arnaz JRB. Their family felt complete. Their hearts felt full, but happiness, especially in their world, never lasted long. Even as their family grew and their show became one of the greatest successes in television history, the internal cracks deepened. The pressure, the rumors, the long work hours, the emotional wounds they never healed. Lucille wanted peace. Desi wanted escape. They were living two different dreams while sharing one collapsing life. And eventually, the weight became unbearable. Their love story, once blazing with passion, was slowly turning into smoke. The world saw the laughter, but behind that laughter, Lucille Ball was silently preparing for the most painful decision of her life, a decision that would end a chapter that millions believed would last forever. The world believed Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were the perfect couple, the radiant, red-headed genius of comedy and the handsome Cuban bandleader whose smile could light up an entire room. They were the dream team, the golden couple of Hollywood. But as the years passed, what was once a story filled with passion and hope slowly turned into a painful struggle that neither of them could escape. By the late 1950s, despite their extraordinary success, Lucille and Desi's marriage was hanging by a thin thread. Desi was exhausted from running Desilu Studios, which he and Lucille had built from the ground up. The studio became a massive empire responsible for creating not only I Love Lucy, but later, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and many other television classics. Desi was brilliant when it came to business and production. He had a mind that changed the television industry forever, but brilliance came with a cost. The stress consumed him. He was constantly working, constantly fighting to stay competitive, constantly burning himself out. The pressure led him to unhealthy habits, and the rumors continued to grow louder. Hollywood gossip magazines speculated tirelessly, printing stories that cut Lucille deeply, stories about Desi being seen in nightclubs, sometimes intoxicated, sometimes visibly with other women. Whether every rumor was true or not didn't matter anymore, because Lucille could feel her heart breaking every time she heard one. She tried to hold herself together. She tried to forgive. She tried to believe he would come back to her the way he used to. But the distance between them widened, not physically anymore, but emotionally. And that distance was far more painful than any miles a tour bus ever created. Lucille once said, "You can live with a man who makes mistakes, but you can't live with a man who makes you feel alone." She would go to the studio early, perform with perfection, make millions laugh until their stomachs hurt, and then return home to silence, tears, and a heart that felt heavy enough to break her ribs. She would look at the pictures on the wall of their beautiful children, their beautiful wedding day, their world-famous show, and wonder how everything so magical could collapse so violently. Their love hadn't disappeared. It was still there, too strong, too intense, too deeply rooted, but sometimes love alone isn't enough to save two people who are drowning. Lucille tried one last time to save them by ending I Love Lucy in 1957 and replacing it with a new format, the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, hoping less stress and fewer episodes might bring them closer again. But instead of saving their marriage, it revealed just how broken everything had become. Filming days turned into brutal emotional battles. Their arguments became sharper, louder, more painful. Their crew could feel the tension. Their friends could see the sadness behind Lucille's smile and Desi's frustrated silence. Even their children sensed the storm forming around them. And then, on a day that Lucille never wanted to arrive, she realized something devastating. She was losing herself. The brave girl who once swore she would never allow life to crush her was disappearing beneath the weight of heartbreak. So she made the hardest decision she had ever made. She filed for divorce. The news shocked the world. It felt impossible. How could the couple who invented the American television love story end in divorce? People were stunned. Headlines exploded. Fans cried. The idea that Lucy and Ricky were no longer together felt like the world was suddenly less bright. On the day the divorce was finalized in 1960, Lucille stood outside the courthouse and wept uncontrollably. Desi, too, was devastated. Even after everything, the rumors, the fights, the pain, they still loved each other more deeply than most people ever experience. But they couldn't stay together without destroying each other. Lucille said years later, "Desi was the great love of my life, but we just weren't good for each other anymore." Their marriage was over, but their love was not. They continued speaking almost every day for the rest of their lives. They remained partners in business for some time, co-parenting with care and respect. When people expected bitterness, they offered loyalty. When the world expected hatred, they offered friendship. Their love simply changed shape instead of disappearing. Lucille later admitted that even after the divorce, every time the phone rang unexpectedly, part of her wished it was Desi. After the divorce, Lucille felt empty. For the first time in 20 years, she was alone. She was terrified. Her life had been shaped around Desi, and now she had to rediscover who she was without him. She threw herself into work because work was the only thing that had ever saved her. She returned to television with a new show, The Lucy Show, and later Here's Lucy, becoming the first woman in television history to own and operate a major studio. She broke barriers for all women who would follow. But success didn't erase loneliness. Rumors continued to chase her. Rumors about secret relationships with co-stars, directors, and studio executives. Some claimed she had hidden romances even while married. Others whispered that powerful men in Hollywood tried to control her, manipulate her, or use her fame. None of these rumors were ever verified, and Lucille refused to respond to them. She believed that explaining herself only gave the rumors more power. She once said, "I don't care what they say about me, as long as it isn't true." But the truth was that after Desi, she didn't want another whirlwind romance. She wanted peace, stability, trust, a friend. And in 1961, she found that in comedian and actor Gary Morton. Gary Morton was not like Desi. He wasn't fiery or unpredictable or a genius producer. He was gentle, calm, and grounding. He made Lucille feel safe again. He didn't try to compete with her, overshadow her, or control her. He simply loved her for who she was, the woman, not the legend. They married in 1961, and Lucille spent decades with him in a quieter, steadier partnership. But even Gary knew that Lucille's heart would always belong partly to Desi. He respected that. He never tried to erase the past. He knew that the love Lucille and Desi once shared was too big, too powerful, too historic to ever disappear. Lucille and Desi had one final, deeply emotional moment many years later. In 1986, Desi was battling serious health issues, and their daughter convinced Lucille to call him. When she did, they talked for a long time. They laughed, reminisced, and cried together. When they were about to hang up, they said something they had not said in years. Desi said softly, "I love you, Lucy." And she replied through tears, "I love you too." Those were the last words they ever spoke to each other. Desi passed away shortly after. When Lucille heard the news, she collapsed in tears. She locked herself in her room for hours and refused to speak. For days, she could hardly function. She later told a close friend that losing Desi felt like losing a part of her soul. She carried that grief until the end of her life. Lucille Ball passed away on April 26, 1989. The world mourned the loss of a legend, a pioneer, a warrior, a dreamer, and a woman who made more people laugh than anyone before her. But behind the legacy was a human story, not of perfection, but of love, endurance, pain, sacrifice, and extraordinary courage. She changed comedy forever. She changed television forever. She changed Hollywood forever. She changed what it meant to be a woman in a world built for men. But most of all, she taught the world something powerful. Laughter does not mean the absence of pain. Success does not mean the absence of struggle. Love does not always end the way we want. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real. Lucille Ball lived a life filled with untold romances, heartbreak, hidden battles, and rumors that followed her for decades. But behind every rumor was simply a woman trying desperately to be loved and understood. A woman who never stopped fighting for her happiness. A woman who never stopped believing in dreams. In the end, when asked if she still believed in love, she answered, "Always. How could I not? It gave me everything worth having." And perhaps that is her greatest legacy, not laughter and not fame, but love that survived even when life tried to tear it apart.